Look, Strixhaven was just plain bad. I didn't like the book at all, and I wasn't going to talk about it, but then I read this spell. Silvery Barbs is one of the worst spells I've seen in a long time. Its level of design is on par with Healing Spirit or Crown of Madness. Just terrible. That's why this video is going to talk about why Silvery Barbs is so strong, and 3 ways DMs can mitigate the spell's effects. Because look, banning official content at a table is a slippery slope, and lots of players just straight up don't like it. In my experience as a player, it just feels bad to show up to a table expecting at the bare minimum to play official content and then it just getting banned. So first off, why is this godforsaken spell so powerful? Statistically, advantage gives you about a +5 to a d20 roll and disadvantage a -5, which is essentially what this first level spell is giving all people. And stats people, you can correct me about the exact math if I'm a little bit off. So, forcing this reroll and giving someone else advantage on an attack roll, ability check, and saving throw. That sentence alone already talks about a pretty powerful spell, but let's look at it even closer. It only works on successes, so you don't really need to guess. You don't need to apply this spell before you know the outcome of a roll. Also, it has a fairly huge range, 60 feet. That's going to cover most battlefield maps that a DM is going to put down in front of players. Also, it's a first level spell. A caster, a bard, sorcerer, wizard can take this at first level and use it for the entire campaign. It's a resource that is going to stay relevant forever. And now usually, the higher up in levels you go, the more, I don't want to say useless, but less impactful those first level spell slots become. There's almost this power creep now with these first level slots where they are now just going to be Silvery Barb slots. And the reroll is bad enough, but giving advantage to another creature is insane. It's 2 spells in 1. Also, there is just no DM workaround to the reroll because it's not like you're giving a roll disadvantage. The reroll just happens and you're taking the lower roll no matter what. If a creature already has advantage on the roll, this just won't give disadvantage to make it a straight roll. No. You're just taking whatever good roll that they had and taking it away. Or even worse, if the creature has disadvantage and still succeeds, you're going to give another reroll. This can work as triple disadvantage in some situations. Essentially, it can be summed up as a spell that costs very little resources, and a spellcaster gets a tool that is incredibly powerful with very little counterplay on the DM's part. In one campaign I'm a player in, I'm playing an Eloquence Bard, and an Eloquence Bard can already give a -1d6 at 3rd level to a spell save. Now, a 3rd level Eloquence Bard can already give a -d6 to any spell save that they want, essentially, and if that save succeeds, they are still going to be able to force a reroll. Or we can look at sorcerers with the heightened meta magic that can give disadvantage to a spell save, and if it's a success, now with Silvery Barbs, they force another reroll, triple disadvantage. Don't even get me started with divination wizards and their portent features, combined with Silvery Barbs. Eldritch Knight fighters can take this cantrip too. We have fighters that can force rerolls where the usual DCs are going to be low because again, they're fighters, but now, nope, they can just force these rerolls and give themselves advantage on the next attack roll or save or ability check. Also, and I think this is something that I haven't heard talked about a lot, rogues are automatically buffed if anyone in the party has access to Silvery Barbs. I just give the rogue advantage every single fucking time and have them nuke enemies solo without someone next to them, without any support. They are a striker that can go throughout the entire battlefield and do massive amounts of damage. And this spell also synergizes with the Magic Initiate feat, where technically any class can now have access to 1 free reroll and advantage, which is just crazy. This spell being 1st level is insane. So, how can DMs mitigate the effects without outlawing the spell or homebrewing? Well, I've come up with 4 ways recently. Firstly, this spell requires you to see your target, so darkness or blindness can work, really walls even, anything to break vision on your actual target. Cloud effects and magic can block vision as well. Really, this spell just forces DMs to be creative with their environment if you don't want to be subjugated to its effects. Secondly, this spell requires you to use your reaction, so abuse the caster when they don't have a reaction. For frontline fighters, reactions keep enemies in place, so if you are an Eldritch Knight or someone else who has taken the Magic Initiate feat for this, just run right by them and abuse the fact that they don't keep anyone in place anymore. Just attack the squishies in the back line. And if a spellcaster doesn't have their reaction, abuse them too. Usually spellcasters at higher levels are holding their reactions for like a counter spell or something else, so you can essentially bait out the Silvery Barbs and then hit them with your biggest spell, because the enemies would now know they've already used the reaction, they're not going to get counterspelled. There are also spells like Slow that can eat up reactions, so the Silvery Barbs wouldn't be able to be used. And if you want to dip your toe into homebrew, make homebrew creatures with effects that can be avoided by just using your reaction. Maybe a Noxious Gas or Medusa's Glare that you just need to use your reaction to turn away from. Essentially, with all these options, we are giving the spellcaster a mechanical choice. They can have their Silvery Barbs or something else, but it's not just this automatic thing that they're going to be doing. Thirdly, it has a verbal component. Now, this kind of sucks and is part of another reason why this spell is so powerful. It's only a verbal component, but you can still mess with that verbal component. As a DM, I say that verbal components are spoken clearly and at a normal volume of voice. So, if you're sneaking around and trying to use Silvery Barbs, it's probably going to give away your position. Or, if the character is in a social setting, someone is going to easily be aware that they're casting a spell in front of them, either through the verbal component, or you can flavor this spell to have a little bit of a visual effect around the person being cast on. Literal Silvery Barbs puncturing their skin, perhaps. Whatever the case, you can at least limit the spell to mostly combat settings so that you don't have to deal with this essentially being a first level guidance of sorts. And lastly, you have access to Silvery Barbs too. Remember, whatever the players can do with this spell, you can do as well. And sometimes if they have a really overpowered ability in your opinion, the best thing to do is just mirror the players with that overpowered ability or spell. That way, the playing field is literally equal because you both know you're going to be doing this, and that way it gives this little chess game of when you're going to use your Silvery Barbs and when they're going to use their Silvery Barbs. Because honestly, with this spell being released, looking at my own homebrew world, I'm like, this is a basic spell. This is like Prestidigitation. This is like Firebolt. This is like Mage Hand. This is a basic spell that so many mages are going to learn just because it is so powerful. So if you roll up to even a novice mage, someone who knows like the bare minimum of magic, they will probably know Silvery Barbs because it gets you out of so many difficult situations. I think the good news is that it's almost a certainty at this point that Silvery Barbs gets nerfed in an upcoming book and that it is changed. However, I also like to look at this as a good opportunity for us DMs to practice spell workarounds. Look at a spell and think about what it does well and what its limitations are. What does the spell need? What's its range? What do you need for it to work, etc. There are probably lots of spells that you as a DM are having to deal with that you're like, man, this is super powerful. So take this video as kind of a guideline on how to work around these types of spells. But if you want ways to make your combats more dynamic as a DM, check out this video right here. It's one of my favorites. And thank you for entering the dungeon.